Excellent. All right, welcome everyone to the Media over QUIC virtual interim for today. We, as always, continue for an hour. This meeting is being recorded. This is note well, if you're new to IETF or you just never got around to reading this, you should probably take a look at it. It explains the intellectual property implications of you being here, as well as discussing some code of conduct issues. Just meeting logistics. If you have any technical chat, this is your weekly or bi-weekly reminder to use the Zulip, not the Google Meet chat, for various reasons. There is a link to the Zulip in the Google Meet chat that is pinned, so please click over there if you want to not take up mic time. Also linked in the Google Meet chat is a link to the blue sheets, so please go there and put your name and affiliation up at the top of the minutes. And as always, for obviously, we're using Google Meet for audio video slides. You figured that out because you're here. Also, if you wish to enter the queue and comment on something, just use the raise your hand function here in Google Meet. We need a scribe who's willing to note our key decisions. This is being recorded this time, so we don't need a verbatim play-by-play. Just recording the key movements that happened today would be valuable. I can drink coffee longer than you guys can stall.
I can take the notes this time, so.
You guys, when the chair has to take notes, it's like a failure of the working group as a whole. But okay,
I can be the scribe.
Oh, Sebastian, thank you so much. Alrighty. All right, wonderful. Now we can move on. This is the agenda. Alan sent out a very detailed document about the status of various relatively hot PRs. I'm going to hand over to him in about a minute here. And does anyone like to bash this before I do that? Alan.
I'm just going to make a short comment, which is that between after Monday and before now, 760 got a couple of comments that I think moves it to the main agenda section. And I think I put it toward the end since we spent the bulk of time last week talking about it. And I think Will is not here and Suhas may not be here. And they were the people, like it's Will's PR. And so anyway, we may not discuss it as much.
Okay. We'll see who filters in.
Okay.
Okay. Noted. So we'll talk about 826.905 very briefly and then jump to 816. Sounds like what we're going to do. Lovely. All right. Would anyone else like to bash the agenda? All right. As we've had a number of late arrivers, please go to the Google Meet chat and click on the notes to go add your name and affiliation to the blue sheets. You can also access that through the data tracker entry for this meeting if you, for some reason, have no access to Google Meet chat. And with that, I will stop sharing. And Alan, you have the ball. I assume it's Alan, maybe Ian, but
no, it's me.
You seem to be driving this one. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. While you're firing that up, let me just have some other admin notes. Number one, if you have not already, if you're planning to attend the Stockholm meeting in person and you have not already, please add your name to the list in the agenda page. You can file a PR or you can just email the chairs and let us know you're going to be there just so we get the attendance numbers right for our hosts. The other thing is we are considering moving the next interim from Wednesday the 30th to Monday the 28th. Would anyone have a problem with that? Same time.
Say that one more time.
Moving the interim from the 30th to the 28th, same time. So Wednesday to Monday. Alad, I don't think can make the Wednesday, which seems like a problem, and that would also give us the opportunity to have one last meeting before we land draft 11.
Can you repeat the dates one more time, please?
From the 30th to the 28th, Wednesday to Monday.
in 2 weeks
I
time.
mean, that doesn't work for me, but I'm just one person, and I think your logic makes sense regardless of the fact it doesn't work for me. Like,
Okay.
it's more important that Alan's there than me, if that's what it comes down.
With all due respect for your contributions, Colin, I have to agree. Okay. Very well. All right. So I'm going to send something out to the list, and then I would expect maybe tomorrow this change happening if nobody screams on the list. All right. Now, Alan, now I'm really handing it over to you.
Okay. Let me see if I can hit the slideshow button and make it bigger. Okay. You guys seeing it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So of the 3 that were listed as ready to merge in the email, no significant comments I think have come in on either 826 or 905. I think Colin asked for a quick clarification just this morning on 905 about the scope, but I think it's just mentioning editorially that it's just like subscription ID.
Yeah,
It's
fix up before you merge, not a.
yeah. Okay. So these will probably go in today or very soon after. Thank you for the feedback, everyone who reviewed them. Okay. So sorry, this is like a little bit out of order from what Martin had in the agenda, but I don't know why I put this one first, but I did. Okay. So there's the issue is, should objects with status do not exist be able to say that they have extensions? And the recommendation from the editors is essentially that things that have the status not exist are not actual objects, and so they can't have extensions. So does anybody want to comment on this? Or it does have a couple of approvals already, but then I think someone said that we should let them have extensions. So
And to clarify,
Okay.
you can still have a 0 payload object if for some reason all you want is extension headers.
Right. You can set object status normal, payload length 0, and extensions. If all you want to send is extensions, you can do that. But not exists is not exist. Okay. I'm not hearing any pushback on this, so we'll probably merge this one also. I'm on the wrong. Hold on. Okay, now we can talk about publisher priority. Okay, so what to do about publisher priority when scheduling fetch? So there's a number of things going on. One, so a fetch response can refer to many objects, and each of those objects can have a different publisher priority, but they all are going on one stream, which is different in when they were sent as part of a subscribe, they were going on different streams. So it's a little challenging as an implementation to use that publisher priority to change the stream priority as objects are transmitted and retransmitted. So that's a little bit complicated. And then also the publisher priority was set when that track was live, but that priority may not be relevant for when it's being fetched anymore. So maybe it was super important at the time it was live, but now it's sort of being used for fetch. So it's not clear that the publisher priority is still meaningful. On the flip side, relays are not supposed to forward the subscriber priority upstream. So if you have a situation with, say you have a publisher and 2 relays and then a subscriber, like by the time that second relay sees the fetch and the subscribes, like all the subscriber priorities will be the same. And so it's not great that there's no indication that there's anything there. Also, like, I'm not sure that there's a definitive answer to are fetches always more important than subscribes, or are subscribes always more important than fetches. I think it depends on what you're trying to do. So I don't know that we can unilaterally give guidance there. So anyway, that's, and so the editor's recommendation is we only require you to look at the subscriber priority when you're scheduling a fetch. If you have 2 or more fetches, or you have a fetch and a subscribe and they have the same subscriber priority, then it's sort of the same as if you had 2 subscriptions that had the same subscriber and publisher priority, which is currently implementation dependent. Like, both things are supposed to get some time, but there's no guarantee that they're like of any particular ordering. Okay, so Colin.
So look, I think this is the same discussion we had in the subscribe. Like the same things were said exactly the same. And of course, there's cases where the subscriber knows that it wants this at a higher priority or a lower priority, and it needs to set the subscribe priority. So let's say we have a range of priorities that are being used for the active subscribes, and they go from 10 to 20, right? It's very easy to imagine a case where you know that I need to use a priority below or above that range for my fetch just from the application we have to subscribe. So obviously we definitely have to have that, right? That's a strong use case that we need. But we have these other use cases where you don't really know. You want those things that sort of the same priorities, and you want the publisher to know which one of those streams was actually the active one that you needed to get to. And this is very much because of the aggregation upstream problem. So in the case where the subscriber effectively didn't put a priority, or was putting the priority to be the same as all of its other subscriptions, which lots of these use cases do it. This like the real time, like a bunch of the voice cases, we use all publisher priority. Like the subscriber priority will always be not, don't care, right? And on those cases, I'm not, obviously the stuff's coming in order in a single stream, so there's no prioritization there. But when you're fetching multiple things simultaneously, which often happens at the startup when you're fetching stuff, which one of those you want which one of those you want to have priority, the subscriber has no information to make that decision. And all of that information was embedded in the publisher priority. So I don't really, it seemed to me that just you doing exactly the same thing for the that we did for the subscribes would work fine. But if there's an implementation problem or something in that, like maybe we should do something different. But I'm not seeing the problem with just doing that. I'm seeing the use cases where we do want the publisher information to influence the priority of which one of these fetches goes first.
Okay, so if you ever go to the original publisher, you don't really need to signal the priority, because the original publisher knows, right? In this case, like if it wants it to serve subscribes ahead of fetches or fetches ahead, like it has all the information. It's really when it's already delegated it to a relay where the information has to be, we have to give the relay guidance on what to do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always assuming there's multiple hops of relays in these sorts of calls, right?
Yes. The reason why I want to discuss this here is I don't think there's a clear answer, because I don't know that necessarily I fetch things, and the two things that are served in my fetch, one's high priority, one's low priority. Which priority do I use for the stream? Is it the priority of the first object that I send?
When you say use for the stream, do you mean what you set the QUIC priority to? Because that's totally irrelevant. That doesn't matter. That's a totally separate thing.
Well, let me put it this way.
I'm talking about what object you send next.
I know that some implementations build object queues outside of QUIC and let QUIC upcall into it to determine what to send next. But there are implementations that do not and cannot work this way. JavaScript implementations using web transport are an example where you don't really get to set the priority within a stream at different, you have to decide on priority for the stream. And you can change the priority of the stream when you want to, but you can't say the first 10 bytes are this and the second 10 bytes are that.
Okay, I'm talking about which object you pass next to the QUIC stack.
Which in fetch is well-defined. Like you have to pass them in.
Well,
I see.
The stream is well-defined. Which stream you do next is not, the application has to decide that. And
I don't know if Victor's on or somebody else can comment more about the web transport interface. That we are constrained to, but I don't know that you can, I don't think we can unilaterally model that. So you can, which is why it's fine to say it's implementation dependent, right? Like if your stack works that way, you can do that.
Is exactly the same with subscribes, right? If you pass that information, and we corrected, we picked really careful words around what happens in our stuff when we describe the subscribes to make it clear that, look, what happens inside the QUIC stack is sort of out of control a little bit once you've handed it to the QUIC stack. And once the QUIC stack hands it to the kernel buffer, it's definitely way out of control. And what happens on the network is totally out of control, right? We're not trying to deal with that level of stuff. I'm just saying that we should leave this exactly the same as subscribe for all the same reasons. Anyway, I must talk enough. Ian.
Let me ask Ian, what do you want to say, Ian?
I'm fine with Cullen's approach, and maybe add some solid weasel words about how since fetches sent on a single stream and not multiple streams, implementations may have to choose, there will be cases when basically a stream has multiple priority data on it. Basically you will have to deal with the multi-priority problem, or you may have to deal with the multi-priority problem, and implementations, that's basically how the implementations deal with that issue is implementation dependent. So call out the fact that fetch is a little different in this one way, say otherwise do largely what you do for subscribe, and then kind of call out this single stream issue, particularly if there are different publisher priorities on the single stream, and just kind of
fetch is the only case where you can have multiple priority data on the same stream.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of fetches, a lot of tracks are going to have one publisher priority or something. I don't know. It's the audio is more important than
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of the time it might be really easy.
I mean, and we'll note this. I mean, I guess sort of to adding what Colin said, many QUIC implementations, the order that you write stuff, the order that you call write into the QUIC stack has zero bearing on what goes out on the wire.
Sure. Yeah.
And so if saying people you have to give it to the QUIC stack in this order doesn't really, it's the same as saying it's implementation dependent. But if that's what we want to say, that's
I mean, we're sort of describing a desired behavior of the overall system with an understanding that there's no way to enforce that ever, depending on the exact timings of how stuff arrives, right? And when your congestion control gives you space to send, right? And we've already treaded that whole ground. I just don't see how this is different.
I mean, I'm very much trying to understand this case of what actually happens in a system where I've written a high priority and low priority object to a stream into QUIC.
Yeah, sure. No, look, I have a really simple explanation for you. Okay, I have a caching relay, and I fetch from it 10 streams that all and 100 and 100 megabytes on each one of those streams. Okay. And some of those streams I mark as high priority, and some of those I mark as low priority. Just on the subscribe priorities. Let's ignore anything.
Subscribe priority is not touched here. As long as you set a different subscribe priority, that takes effect. This is about what the publisher.
Understand, but let's just talk about what happens with subscribe priority. So I say one of the has a subscribe priority of higher than one of the other ones. I expect that I will get that 100 megs of data first, right? Okay. Now imagine I set my subscribe priorities all to the same thing. Now you'd look at the publisher priorities to decide which one filled up the congestion queue, first, right?
And if there was a single publisher priority per track, it would be clear what to do. But given that it can change, is where the complexity comes. Anyway, I think does anybody else have an opinion they want to voice besides Colin or Ian, so we can get a better sense of the room? But I'm happy to go in the direction that Colin and Ian are suggesting, which is do your best. If somebody wants to voice a different opinion or a same opinion. Okay, we will update this PR to say, do your best. The priorities on fetch might change.
And look, when it's the case you're talking about different priorities in the same track that happens fetch, I agree, all bets are off. I don't know what happens. I don't even care. Right? That's not a use case that matters.
Okay, so you're more concerned with the case where
they're all the same priority.
Yeah. Okay. Track A always had one priority. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. That makes sense. All right. Thank you. Okay. Clarify how subscribe filters work. Allow absolute start before latest. So this tries to explain. So we talk about filters. We don't really give a clear definition of what a filter is. So I'm trying to put in a definition of what a filter is. So this is the straw man or what's in the PR. So all filters have a start location and an optional end group. And an object with location L will pass the filter if its location is greater than or equal to the start location. And if there is an end group, it has to be less than or equal to the end of the end group. And that only applies to newly published objects or objects that are received via subscription at a relay. It doesn't apply to anything for fetch. So let me pause there and see, does anybody want to challenge that definition of what a filter is? Okay. So if we accept that as a definition of that is what a filter is, this is the clarification that we're trying to make. What we currently call latest object filter, that is setting the start location of the filter for that subscription to start at the largest seen by the relay group and largest object that it's seen +1. Now, there's a caveat on the next slide to talk about exactly how largest object, there's ambiguity in how large our object is computed. Or if there is no content on this track, the start location of the latest object filter is 0, 0. So any object that comes, like basic, will pass. An absolute start filter is just what it says on the tin. The start location just is whatever is passed and subscribe. Everything that's greater than or equal to that is going to pass, and range is the same. Anything that's greater than or equal to start or less than or equal to end is going to pass. I see your hand, Colin. Let me just go to the next slide, and then we'll take all the questions. I have to go back to my other window, though. Okay, so if you want all the objects that ever arrive, the way you do that is you say, I want absolute start at 0, 0. So anything that comes to the relay or at the publisher will pass this filter because all objects pass a filter that starts at 0, 0. And then we ask, there's this open issue. How do you define what the current object is or the largest object? So it's not in this PR, but the way I envision this working is that when you say latest object, the definition of the filter that you get hinges on what the subscriber sends in subscribe OK. So if you're going to, if the current object is you're halfway through an object, if you have cached the beginning of it, you can go ahead and say that the largest thing you've seen is the one before, meaning that the current object is included, as long as you can send all of it. If you're a caching relay, if you're not a caching relay, you don't have this content, then you set your largest appropriately. So it can be implemented dependent. The only rule is like whatever you say in subscribe OK is what you have to deliver. Okay, so now let me go back to this window, and okay, now there's nobody in the queue. That's all there is. So what do people feel about this?
I mean, so I'll jump in here for a sec. So, I mean, I don't think that's what largest meant. I mean, that's a separate issue. I guess if we only want to discuss about how to move forward, that's fine, right, to a certain degree. But the reason we didn't, the thing that you're calling absolute is what we meant by latest, and it meant things that arrived at the relay after the point in time of this point in time is what happens, right? Which is sort of, you're redefining that to be the absolute one. I do think we have to get really crisp on this PR. You don't know what the next object will be. So if you say your latest object is, like, say, group 1, object 1, if the subscribe OK, if the only thing that a non-caching relay has seen is object 1, group 1, and it's halfway through sending that, it can't send in the subscribe OK. You know, the latest is, I mean, 1,1 is the largest thing it's seen, right? So it can sort of send that, but it's never going to be able to send 1,1. The next thing you're going to get is something that's larger that comes after 1,1, right? So we've got to get the details of this nuance exactly right in the way we phrase it.
Okay, I agree. I think this bit about what 592 is not in the current PR. My plan was to build on the current PR and try to resolve that issue separately.
Yeah, I think the current PR does a good job of clarifying what you said, Colin, because I agree. We've bounced around at how we explained it in the past, and it's not been great. It's been confusing.
Yeah. Clearly, we have confusion, right? We had different people who thought it meant different things, so that's a problem. I'm sort of for fixing that. Why we moved away from the absolute being the one that meant the next, the latest in time, was because people started getting confused with absolute, that maybe that meant if it was a caching relay, they were supposed to get stuff that went backwards in time. Maybe we've clarified that now that subscribe never does that or something like that. And we can get away from that conversation. But, these may not be exact, like we might want to use I'm never going to get hung up on whether we call this red or blue. Okay. But I do think that latest might be a better name for what absolute is in your definition than absolute, and that we should get a different name for what you're defining as latest. But that is a trivial bike shedding thing. I care about the functionality, and I'm fine with the functionality you're proposing.
Okay, yeah, that was my other question. Is all of your functionality that you need covered?
Yes, though I would prefer that from a backwards compatibility and everything else point of view, like the code point we're used for absolute is the one we currently use for latest. Right.
I'm like people. There's other people like trying to
look. That's a trivial point. I'm not going to hang up on that. Okay, I'm not going to do that. But I'm lodging for the point that I think we've had broad consensus in the working group that what you call absolute is what the current draft calls latest.
Okay,
and I don't mind changing the name.
Let's not spend any time. Like, I don't think we're going to see eye to eye on this one, so I don't want to spend any time here debating it. Let's only talk about going forward. If this covers all your functionality, that's good. Okay, Martin.
Yeah, so I'm confused. So are you defining I mean, we've talked around about this. When I'm within the middle recipients object, when I send subscribe ID, what does this PR say? I'm looking at it.
I threw this on the slide, but it's not in this PR.
Okay, so you're just going to handle that separately. Okay,
well,
I'm not even going to
say you can squint and say it is, right? The PR clearly says that the value that comes in subscribe OK is the first thing you won't get, right?
Okay, that's fine.
So if you want to deliver the current object that you're halfway in the middle of,
yeah,
because we didn't say in this PR whether the largest thing you've seen is the largest thing you've seen the beginning of or the largest thing you've seen the end of. And I think it's fine to give wiggle room there.
Okay.
So that implementations at cache can do what they want. Yeah. But I don't want to, let's not get hung up on that here because it's not in this PR at all.
Yeah, I mean, as an individual, like I think I'm okay with as long as the subscribe OK like clearly articulates what you're going to get, which is what you've done here. I think we can have, we can give some flexibility to people to realize, I suppose, on this point. So yeah, I have no problem with that as a solution. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Magnus?
Yes, a question. Is there a benefit or not to define an additional filter for this particular special case?
You mean the special case where the
real zero?
No, we're not defining another filter.
No, they're asking. This is a question. Would it be better to have it as a specific case
why bother
using the absolute start for it?
Yeah, I mean, Ian's question of why bother, sort of like absolute start gives you what you want, right? So I'm not. What is the advantage of defining an extra case that if the relay is going to behave identically?
Okay, I was asking if it's actually would make the compatibility, if you would actually overcode that for what was the previous or something like that.
And if you Martin had a PR that tried to address the same issue.
Yes,
that did add a separate one, and that seems to spawn a lot of discussion.
Yeah,
and so this was sort of attempt to not do it.
If everyone is on the same table, that this is fine, then I have no stake in this game. I just want to avoid having any confusion.
Okay.
So it's hard to tell in the PR what happened to, or where we are on latest group and next group, right? As filters, right?
Okay, so latest group and next group are not currently there, but I think if we agree on 927, it's trivial to add them back because now we have a clear definition of, I want to set the filter to be everything. So we currently have latest object, right? So we add one that's latest group and that has a clear start. Whatever the current group is, 0 is your start. And then same with next. Whatever the current group is, +1, 0 is your start. So I think now that we have this framework to say like a filter works like this, and then you can have different parameters in subscribe that clearly set the mathematical bounds of your filter, then we can add those back on top of this. And that was my intention if people agree here.
So to be clear, the latest group would be different from the latest group we used to have in that it does not deliver everything. It delivers the later arriving things. Okay. Yeah, I don't have a huge problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is like to catch this is useful to catch reordering cases, right? The iframe is big, it had a loss. So the relay hasn't seen object 0 yet. When the subscribe comes in, it's seen 1. but then the loss is repaired. Like I kind of want 0. It's there. Why do I not get it? So it seems like a valid use case to me. And and the relay code is all the same, right? I have a mathematical filter. I receive an object. I apply the filter. It determines if I forward it. Like, I don't see we can define any number of different ways to set the beginning and end points on the filter. Okay.
It seems like you use joining fetch for that case, right?
Yes.
But we don't have to argue about it. Well, actually, never. I withdraw the comment. We can argue about it later.
I was going to say,
it's not part of the PR.
How many different things? There's many features of Mach-T which can be done more than one way. Like, that's how people like it. Okay. Any more comments on 927?
Yeah. Honestly, I think like there's the other issue to redo everything as parameters, and I think this one will like naturally solve that. So I don't think we should bike sheds this now, because we'll re-bike sheds that later when we get to that issue.
Okay, I was thinking the same, Victor. So for people who haven't been reading GitHub multiple times a day as I do, like there's issues about like whether we want to do this as an enum as we currently do, or whether like there's a parameter for start and a parameter for end. And yes, let's talk about that later, is my recommendation. Okay. Next up. Okay, now we're back to auth. Okay, so based on the feedback that we received. So first of all, compared to when we just, if you did not reread it after Will's update following our discussion of this issue 2 weeks ago, you definitely should, because things changed a little bit. But that was also, we sent an email asking you to read it 2 days ago, so everyone probably has. So based on what's there, there's a couple questions that came up. So one was, are you allowed to register the same token value with different aliases? Or for that matter, like this PR introduces the notion of a type of the token, which is like, is it privacy pass, or there'll be some IANA registry that tells you what the bytes mean. And so do we say like, you can just only have one token of any particular type for a given request? And our recommendation is that we basically say you can have one token type. So you can have at most one token of a given type in a single request. But if people know use cases better, it probably would help. And then there's another open question about how to handle tokens that expire related to how they're accounted for in the token cache. So our recommendation is, if you're a receiver and you understand what the token's expiration is, you can discard that token, but you have to sort of retain that token alias and the state that it is expired, so that if somebody tries to use it, you can give them an error code which says like that token is expired. And the way that it's removed from the token cache is still by the original sender has to send you a delete for it. I think that's all the open issues we have. So I'm going to open it for discussion. Colin?
Everyone else? Okay, that's just me. On the duplicates, so let's say I'm using cat tokens, but I'm dealing with a request that's going to go through relays from 2 different providers. I mean, I'm probably going to need 2 different authorization tokens, right?
That's good, but how do you know based on that, how do you know which one to send where? Or do you send both places?
You send both all the time, and they trial decode and find one that might work for them.
Okay. Which I'm happy if that's how you want it to work, but do we want to try to do better?
Well, I agree that leaves room for improvement, but most attempts I've seen to improve this just basically end up adding a scope or something to it that just add more data that's in it, and it turns into the same thing as looking at the token anyway. I don't really care if we solve that problem. We could solve that a little bit farther down the road or something, or not solve it. But because basically that information's already in the token in a very easy to get access way is the reason why I'm not worried about it.
And even the relay knows how to look at that.
Well, the relay has to know how to interpret the token if it's going to use it for authorization. So if it doesn't understand the token, it's just going to throw away. Then it doesn't need to look at the token. And if it needs to look at the token, it understands the token. So, and it will probably, by looking at the token, can quickly understand whether it's the token it should be looking at if there's multiple tokens. But I think we need to solve, I mean, I do think we need to deal with this problem of we're putting tokens in to authorize for multiple networks.
Okay, so I think that sounds like a recommendation to basically allow
Duplicate token types, yeah.
allow duplicate token type. Do you care about forbidding registering the same token value with two different aliases? Like, do you want to make that work?
That sounds weird. I don't know why you do that, but yeah.
I would say you should, like, people shouldn't do that because it's dumb, but also then making the peer like check every single one and do like a hash function or something and like ensure that when there are duplicates, you actually enforce that rule seems like kind of annoying.
So just make it a should not, and then the receiver doesn't have to do anything.
That sounds great.
I mean, I don't know that the receiver has to trust. I mean, I think we should say that the sender, I mean, I don't care. You can say should. I hate should. I never use should. I'd say the sender must not do this. And that wouldn't imply to me that the receiver needed to check that they didn't. It meant just they could rely on it. But I don't care. That's like details, like whatever you guys think, right? And then on the second one, I mean, you can't use a token after it's expired. That's the definition of expired. So I think your second one is just categorically true.
The nuance here is
keep the alias.
Is to keep the alias around. And the reason is mostly I'm thinking what I really want to do is if you use an alias that you haven't registered or you have deleted, I want that to be a session error, because if you screw this stuff up, you could be sending the wrong auth to the wrong person. So I really want to be very aggressive about failing things. If I let the receiver throw a token out of the cache, then something might happen where, like, oh, I send 2 subscribes, one after another. The first one sees like, oh, the token's expired, and then that causes the receiver to throw it out of the cache. The second one tries to refer to that token, and then, oh, that token doesn't exist. You did something bad, and I'm closing the session. So I want the sender to be in full control of like what aliases are valid.
Right. And I want them to get really clear messages when this gets messed up, not reason codes, or freezing.
Yes. Well,
100% agree. Yeah. So, okay. I'm on the same, it totally makes sense. I agree.
Okay. I'm going to go back to Colin's previous point. I'm fine with disallowing duplicates, like must not send duplicates and may close the connection if you do it. Like you can enforce it if you want to, but you don't have to, kind of thing. As long as we don't require enforcement, because I don't like unenforceable must, but this is an enforceable must. I just don't think most people would bother.
+1.
Okay. Nope.
Martin.
I just want to say the title of this slide is fake news. It's actually adding the authorization alias parameter, which I think is you're replacing authorization info. And I left the comment that you didn't actually delete authorization info in the PR. So we have like 2 authorization parameters, so you should probably get rid of the other one. That's all.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. This has evolved over time. It's not quite, what is it, unicorn or rainbow status when it gets 100 comments, but it's close. Okay, any other comments? We will probably clean this up and try to merge it, and then next week, unless somebody has something else. I know Suas was one who had a bunch of comments, and he couldn't be here today, so hopefully he's cool with decisions here. Let's see. Add a mechanism for communicating the size of a group ID gap. So this is the new PR, and it was in the as time permits, so maybe not everyone read it. But this is like, so we define this as it uses extension headers, but we define the extension type in Mach-T. So there's a new section at the bottom that's like, here are the extensions that are defined in this document. And there's one that says group ID gap. It's called prior group gap. And it's optional, but if you know that there's a gap, you can put this here. And it's useful, particularly for a cache or for a receiver, to say, like, if you don't have something in this range, you don't need to go and fetch it because it doesn't exist. And that fetch is just going to fail. So it's useful for that reason. So the open questions are, is this a good use of object extension headers, or should we spell the same concept differently? So I think there was a comment like, oh, we should make prior gap size sort of part of the canonical definition of an object. I'm not sure. And then another question is, should this be allowed on any object, or should we restrict it only to objects at the beginning of a subgroup? Which ties into another comment I think Giovanni made this morning on a different issue, which was like, should we have a way to stick extensions only in the subgroup header rather than per object extensions? So, yeah, I'll open it up if anybody wants to comment on this. Victor.
Yeah, well, one of the use case for group gaps is that, like, since you could publish things out of order, you could publish group 10 and then 20s and 15. Is my correct understanding?
There are many reasons why somebody might want to have a gap, but like, for example, maybe you are doing something like, I don't necessarily know that going backwards is why you might want to have a gap. Your group IDs might have some semantic meaning to you. And you might intentionally put a gap there, like you're using timestamps and logging. So I logged at this thing and there's some sort of, it's somehow correlated with timestamp. Then sometime later, I do another one. There's a large gap between the two groups. And the new one just says, by the way, the last thing I published was 100 groups ago, and I will never publish anything in between.
Yeah. So my opinion, yeah, I'm not entirely sure this actually solves, and like, if this doesn't.
It doesn't solve what? I'm sorry, I missed your comment.
Like, if that is like, if I understand the reasons why we support group ID gaps, this does not work at all.
Right. If what you want to do is go back and publish in the middle, you can't use group ID gap. So, but this is still this can still be a useful hint. Okay. Colin?
I mean, I think the use cases people are concerned about that Victor's thinking about, where you go back in the gaps or whatever, like you won't use fetch in those cases. Like we still have that same issue. But I mean, this seems, you know, this seems fine. This causes no harm. That's really clear, right? And it's, you know, if people want to add this doesn't seem like a big thing. We're not requiring either side even really implements or does anything. Like a relay may pay attention to this information or not, right? It's a hint. It seems a perfectly useful hint to go around. And given that, I do think it should be, I don't want to burn up bytes on this when this hint isn't used because of trying to get to the, you know, don't roast the environment or whatever. So I like it as an extension versus putting it as a core thing in every object. So, you know, I don't know, this makes a huge difference, but I don't see any harm with it. I'm in favor.
Okay. Martin?
+1 to not putting in every object. So as an individual, the other way to spell this is with group does not exist. If we were modify it to have a range in that, and like I don't really care if we spell it an extension or in an object, but I don't know that we need group does not exist if we're doing this.
This was also, I think Suas raised this comment, is like, essentially, if we add this, there's sort of two ways to do the same thing.
No, I'm really tired of us doing that unless it supports a use case.
I mean, I think the thing that points out is that this gap today, if I want to have a gap of 1,000 objects, I have to send 1,000 group IDs. So we could change that to have a range, which I know you've opened an issue for.
Yeah.
Or we could do this. There actually isn't an object status called group does not exist. There's just end of group. So
no,
you
yeah,
just
there
send
is.
end of group with object 0 to mark that the group does not exist.
Wait, no, did we change that? Because there's
It was removed like 2 or 3 drafts ago. I was also surprised.
All right. Are you sure? All right. Well, then, okay. I just missed the boat on that then. So I guess the question is, if I then do a fetch for a group ID that does not exist, like what is that?
Oh,
like
that's actually a great point, because end of group does need to be delivered in fetch, but if we have, but the do not exist ones don't. And also end of group can have extensions. And we just talked about do not exist things don't get extensions. So we probably need to bring group not exist back for that reason.
I mean, like, I think it's the best reason to not. So I mean, like, it would be weird at a relay, but like, you would want to have explicit message that like encodes that certain things don't exist. That is not like if there's like 0 and 10,000 and nothing in between, and I fetch 2,000 to 3,000, I don't want to have to deliver 10,000's object extension to like indicate that doesn't exist. So I think they're like
I agree with what you want 100%.
Yeah.
But don't you just not send those? Don't
Yeah,
you just open the stream and close the stream and you're done?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think we need to think carefully through the semantics of this, exactly what we're doing. But
I do like the idea of in a fetch, the not getting something means it doesn't exist. We don't need to explicitly put it there.
right.
And that is how it is currently defined.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe it's just fine then.
I'm going to open an issue about group not exist again, or like we need, at the very least, we need to explain.
Yeah, this might be okay, but I mean, I'm shocked that status doesn't exist anymore. That's news to me. So
Surprised me too.
So maybe all my stuff is inoperative. All right, thanks.
Mo?
Yeah, I was also okay with if this is something optional, but you're asking for some normative relay behavior, aren't you? This is not just you can all ignore it, is it?
You can, I mean, the relay wants to fetch something, even though it knows from like, let's say I got an object that says there's a gap of 1,000 before this group, and then that relay receives a fetch for something in the gap. The relay can still make a fetch for something that someone told it was in the gap. Like if it wants to, it's going to get no objects is the response. But like I didn't say you're not allowed to do it.
So there's not going to be any normative language about a publisher can't send something that was previously.
Oh, that is there.
Just a gap.
If I say group ID gap 100, and then so let's say my first group is 100, and I say there's a gap of 100, 0 to 99, do not exist, and then later I publish something in group 50, that is malformed.
So
now
you're saying that's normative.
That is normative.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then this is a original publisher only extension.
Yes. If you read the text, it says that only the original publisher can add this. Now, I did it when I first drafted this PR. It occurred to me that a relay that has performed a fetch can insert this, right? If it discovered a gap via fetch, we're like, oh, there's a gap here. But then I was like, no. So I,
yeah, no, it didn't. It doesn't know why I didn't get that data.
I mean, it's just optional. For one thing, that the original publisher may not know the size of a gap, right? It could be caused by it crashed and restarted, right? So like, there could be a gap, but it may not know the size of it.
But the only normative requirement is on the original publisher to not violate what it said.
If the
Everything
publisher
else,
said yes,
no normative anything. Okay, yeah, then I'm fine with it. So I think it's an op that won't be used, but it's fine.
Wait a minute, that fetch thing. Okay, so I think we talked about in Denver that like that you cannot use fetch with not temporal group IDs, right? Like that
you
was
use fetch with ranges. You can fetch one object at a time, but you can't fetch more than one.
Okay.
I think that was what we said. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think the draft sort of has it. It's not going to really work, is what it says.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, like, I don't. So your statement about relays. So I mean, I think anytime we say the relay can't do this, that requires punting to the original publisher. I guess this is an individual opinion. Is like that's obviously not scalable if we do it too much. So I'm very leery of what you said. We've already established that if you're doing non-sequential thing that you cannot do fetch, or like, well, you could do fetch, but you're going to get very screwy results. So like, don't do that. And like, I would hate to say that, oh, like if a relay goes and fetches 0 to 1,000 and gets an empty stream back, I think we should have it be able to infer that like there's nothing in there. And that, I mean, the original publisher will give it a fetch error if you can't do that, right? But if it gets an empty stream, that means those objects don't exist. And if someone tries to fetch in that range, you can just take care of it locally and not have to go all the way back to the original publisher.
Okay, that I don't think that is what I think is there now, and I did not attempt to change it. So like, if I send a fetch for a range and I get back, the answer that comes back is definitive for everything in the range. It's there or it's not. And that's cacheable. You can't later decide something does exist in that range because I could have cached it.
Well, I mean, I thought you said earlier that relays could not infer a gap based on having previously done a fetch and gotten nothing.
Oh, they can. They just can't insert this extension on their own. I'm not sure. Like,
okay, yeah, I guess that's fine.
Possible if the original publisher was being lazy, but then later the relay did it.
Yeah, okay, I'm fine with that. That's fine. Yeah,
it just seemed like it was going to be like, because maybe I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, that's I can live with that. Like if in the same way that you should not insert does not exist, even though if you know it doesn't exist, you should not do this.
Yeah.
We got rid of does not exist, but
okay.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Ian?
Just to clarify, this is a statement of fact, but it is not a statement. It is saying the thing it's saying, which is, I swear that like the 100 groups behind me like don't exist. It's not saying that the 101th group behind me does exist, right?
That is correct.
Okay, because otherwise we have this problem that objects that go from normal to do not exist. If you had a group that like expired from the cache permanently, like this video call or something, then when it went from normal to does not exist, if there was a group gap, like and you use this header, I wouldn't want someone to infer that like there might have been something 101 groups behind me in the past, but there isn't right now.
Okay.
And, yeah.
So the reason why this is useful is people are concerned about the way our gaps work.
Yep.
Can cause a cache
to
have to do work and send requests to origins that will never be useful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
So the purpose here is to like hint out those cases where they are known to be. Now, of course, they still exist because someone may not have used the hint, or like you say, something is gone from the cache and I have no information about its existence or not. The only way to resolve that is with a fetch to the origin, original publisher.
I just want to make sure that like we're clear that like this is saying the thing it says, and it's not implying like the other thing, which is, as I said, like that.
Okay. If you read the text and if you think that
I don't think it does. I just thought of it right now and I was like, oh no, like that would be bad if people somehow inferred that. Anyway.
Right. Okay. Colin?
I just got a note for people that sort of are wishy-washy on this one is like the use cases where you're doing time-based things like for logging or something. This works really well. You know exactly what the gap is. You can state it every time. It's not a problem. So there's a bunch of use cases where this will work very well. I'm not sure that fetch is used in those use cases, but you know.
All right. I didn't hear anybody comment on whether we should say that this extension can only be in the first object in a subgroup, or it can be in any object, can be in multiple objects.
I think this needs to be, look, I think the discussion of should we have header extensions that can go in a subgroup only is a great separate topic for a wide range of extensions, right? And this would be one of them that fell into that category. But I think we should allow this in places other than the start of a subgroup.
Okay.
Right? Because some of the use cases have gaps in the group, right? Like that's it.
Okay.
Well, as always, we need to clarify datagram as well if we're going to make pronouncements about subgroups.
Yeah, I did allow this in a datagram, and someone raised the issue like this is like semi-important information, which is in a datagram, which can get lost. And the answer to that is, yeah, so is end of track, so is end of group. Like, there's sometimes information in datagrams that get lost. Tough cookies. Like, don't use datagrams if you care. Okay. This is the last one. So save a byte when subgroup ID is a common value. What we did is we took 2 bits out of the subgroup header type and used them to indicate whether 1 bit indicates, is there going to be a subgroup ID field in this subgroup header? So that's the first bit. If it's not there, the subgroup ID is determined by what's in the second bit. So you look at the other bit. If the second bit is 0, that means the subgroup ID of the subgroup is 0. And this is really common where you're only publishing one subgroup per group and it's subgroup 0. So you don't need to send that. So it gets removed. The other one is sort of like the stream per object case. And so if you set that second bit to 1, then it will set the subgroup ID to be whatever the object ID is in the first object that comes in the subgroup. The third option is there is an explicit subgroup ID. It's neither 0 nor the ID of the first object in the group. And so you set the first bit to 1, the second bit to 0, and you parse the subgroup ID field to find the subgroup ID. And then the fourth combination is not legal. And so we just said, like, if you have both those bits set to 1, that stream has no meaning. It's not a subgroup. There's a lot of discussion on this PR about extensions, which is not what this PR is about. So we can talk about extensions separately. This is only about saving a byte for subgroup ID. And the other question is, like, we are currently spelling this with flags bits inside subgroup header. Another way to do it is explicitly define every type with like its own enum value, like subgroup header with no subgroup ID, subgroup ID 0. And so there would be like 6 explicit code points because there's another bit in there to say if there are extensions or not. So, which was added in a different PR. So that's kind of the open question here. Everybody else seems to mostly be in favor. So you have 3 minutes to Victor.
Yeah, I between this and extension, I start to hate the entire bit stealing thing. Can I just have like a flag byte in the header?
Well, except that defeats the purpose of saving a byte.
No, I mean, you have
adds a
one
byte.
for extensions, you have one for subgroups, and yeah.
I will say this bit stealing thing was taken from RFC 9000. So, okay. I stunned Victor into no comment. Mo.
Yeah, I see the usefulness of this. I do worry about the spelling. Looking at stuff in isolation, all these little separate PRs, especially for things that are like flags, especially when they're multi-bit flags. I think that goes in the wrong direction of wire efficiency when you look at them as a group, because almost always bit stealing is worse than range coding or arithmetic coding, or the way you're calling it enums. And so here, if you have 3 possibilities, and this other thing has, 3 possibilities, like the extension headers probably do also have 3 possibilities. The combination of them is only 9. You bit steal 2 bits on both of them, now you're stealing 4 bits instead of 3. So, I think it's better to look at all these things for wire efficiency together and figure out a good efficient encoding for all of them together, rather than try to make a decision on them one by one, which is going to be inefficient when it's not scalable. You have 5 things, you're going to be inefficient.
Okay. I think that's valid feedback. And very few people have said, God, I love the spelling of this as bit flags. So I think I'm getting my signal. The reason why I didn't want to go that way was we're up to 6 different ways to say subgroup. And if we add another flag, we'll have 12 or something. So anyway.
I do agree with the direction of using the type bits, and making sure that we have the minimal number of types, but it's also, it's bits on the wire that we should be using. So that part I'm okay with.
All right. Thanks, Martin.
First of all, as an individual, +1 on putting in type bits. I don't care about spelling. As chair, many of you have not signed the blue sheets. We're about out of time. The Google Meet chat has a pinned link to go to the notes, which allows you to go add your name and affiliation to blue sheets. Please do so if you're not already. Alan, I don't think you have time to do another one unless it's going to be extremely fast.
No, I'll just highlight. I mean, I just wanted to see how close I was to the end. I think that was the last. That's the multiple ranges and fetch is the last one.
We're not going to get to that in 1 minute.
I won't go into it, but please review. Let me know. The main open question there was just whether or not, well, A, do people really want this or not? And then 2, if you want it, do you want delta encoding?
Okay. For those of you who are more than 5 minutes late, we are contemplating, as I just sent to the list a few minutes ago, moving the next virtual interim from the 30th to 28th, 1, to accommodate Alan's day job, and number 2, so that we can have one more meeting before draft 11 drops. So, which is of course all prior to the Stockholm meeting. So if you have any concerns about that, please respond to my message on the list. Otherwise, tomorrow Pacific time, tomorrow morning, I will formally move the meeting to the 28th. And finally, if you are planning to attend in person, have not already done so, add your name to file a PR to add your name to the list on the GitHub under the working materials arrangements as an in-person attendee, or if that is too hard for you, just email the chairs and we'll get you added. It's just we have an accurate visitor count for food, etc. And passes. Okay. Does anyone else have something for the good of the order?
Just thanks everyone. We made a lot of progress today. It's awesome.
Yeah. Nice work, editors, for getting this all organized. And thank you all for attending, and we will see you on the 28th.
Thank you, Alan, for producing more stuff than I can consume.
More stuff than
Yeah,
I can
don't send
do.
it in datagrams or you'll lose it.
That's what I want when I use datagrams.
Bye, everybody.